Chapter 1. The Foundation of Attention. Imagine sitting in a bustling corner cafe on a rainy Tuesday morning. The air smells of roasted espresso and damp wool. If you sit quietly and watch the people around you, you begin to see an invisible web connecting everyone in the room. You notice a young couple at a window table. They are physically sitting across from one another, sharing a warm pastry, but their eyes are glued downward to the glowing screens in their hands. They are together, yet oceans apart, skimming the very surface of a conversation they are not fully having. Across the room, an older gentleman is reading a newspaper, completely absorbed in the pages, while a student next to him constantly toggles between a laptop screen, a heavy textbook, and a vibrating phone, looking increasingly frantic with every passing minute. When you truly observe a scene like this, you begin to realize something profound. Attention is absolutely everywhere. It is the invisible, continuous backdrop against which we live our entire lives. At any given second, every waking person on the planet is focused on something. We rarely pause to think about our attention as a finite and precious resource. But think about your own life recently. Perhaps you have felt a creeping sense of relentless busyness, a state where you are doing more than ever but seemingly accomplishing less. You sit down to do deep, meaningful work, but the urge to check a message, refresh a feed, or seek out a quick hit of stimulation feels physically irresistible. You try to multitask, genuinely believing it will make you more efficient, but instead, it leaves you exhausted, fragmented, and stressed. We find ourselves existing in a world where we are subjected to more distraction than at any other point in human history. In fact, research indicates that when sitting in front of a computer, the average person can only maintain focus for a mere 40 seconds before being interrupted or actively self-distracting. 40 seconds. That is not nearly enough time to create, to connect, or to do work that truly matters. When we learn to invest our attention deliberately, everything about our reality changes. Focus is not merely a tool to boost your productivity at the office. It is a vital component of your overall well-being and happiness. But reclaiming your mind requires a commitment to transforming how you interact with the world, starting right now, in this very moment. To truly absorb the concepts we are about to explore, you must prepare your mind and your environment. Think about where you are right now as you listen to this. If your smartphone is in your pocket, silently gathering unread notifications, it acts as a constant gravitational pull on your mind. Our brains naturally seek out novelty, especially when faced with absorbing something that requires mental effort. Consider creating a physical distance between yourself and your devices. Leaving a phone in another room might cause a brief, uncomfortable spike of anxiety, but pushing through that initial withdrawal yields a profound sense of mental freedom. You must also consider the physical environment you inhabit. Are you in a place where interruptions are inevitable? The spaces we place ourselves in heavily dictate the depth of our focus. Finding a quiet sanctuary signals to your brain that it is time to engage deeply. Yet, even in absolute silence, your mind will inevitably wander. Thoughts of unbought groceries, unanswered emails, and random chores will suddenly bubble to the surface of your consciousness. Instead of fighting these internal interruptions, keep a simple piece of paper nearby. When a distraction arises, write it down. This physical act of capturing the thought acts as a release valve, clearing your mental space and allowing you to return seamlessly to the present moment. Sustained attention also requires physical energy. Consuming a cup of coffee or tea can provide a vital boost to your cognitive performance, offering the stamina needed to process complex, layered ideas. But more importantly, you must consume information actively. Do not just let these words wash over you like passive background noise. Treat this experience as an active, ongoing dialogue. Pause when an idea strikes a chord. Reflect on how it applies to your specific daily routines. And recognize that your focus is not limitless. There will be moments when your attention naturally begins to fade and your mind drifts away. That is perfectly normal and human. When you feel that drift, do not force it. Step away. Do something relatively mindless like washing the dishes or taking a quiet walk, and allow your cognitive batteries to genuinely recharge. Your attention is the most valuable currency you possess. How you spend it literally dictates the reality you experience. But to reclaim it, we first have to understand the invisible force that currently dictates our days. We have to examine what happens when we stop choosing where our attention goes and instead let the chaotic world around us make the choice for us. Chapter 2. Breaking the autopilot habit. Think about a typical morning. The alarm rings, pulling you from sleep. Before your eyes are even fully open, your hand reaches out in the dark, fingers instinctively finding the smooth glass of your phone. You silence the alarm, but the screen is already glowing with a handful of notifications. Without a conscious thought, you tap one. 10 minutes later, you are deep into a social media feed, scrolling through the vacation photos of someone you have not spoken to in a decade, or reading a barrage of stressful news headlines. You eventually pull yourself out of bed, shuffle to the kitchen, and start the coffee maker. Your body goes through the familiar motions of brewing the grounds and pouring the cream, but your mind is a million miles away, already anticipating a difficult conversation you have to navigate later that afternoon. You get into your car, drive the familiar route, and suddenly find yourself pulling into a parking space at your workplace, possessing absolutely no memory of the last 5 miles. You have been awake for over an hour, you have performed dozens of complex actions, yet you have not made a single deliberate choice about where to direct your mind. You are operating entirely on autopilot. Operating on autopilot is not inherently a character flaw. It is a biological necessity. Imagine for a moment what your life would look like if every single action required intense, deliberate concentration. What if you had to consciously think about the exact angle of your toothbrush, the specific sequence of tying your shoelaces, or the precise amount of pressure required to press the gas pedal of your car? If you had to analyze every routine action like a complicated math problem, your brain would be completely depleted of energy before you even finished your breakfast. Autopilot is a miraculous evolutionary mechanism that allows us to navigate the repetitive demands of life with minimal cognitive friction. It takes the routines we have mastered and pushes them to the background, freeing up our minds to survive and function. Up to 40% of our daily actions are habits, executed without any conscious deliberation. The profound danger arises when we allow this remarkable mechanism to take control of our attention. While it is perfectly fine to let autopilot handle taking out the trash or buying a bottle of ketchup at the store, allowing it to dictate what we focus on leads to a fragmented, unfulfilling life. When our attention is on autopilot, we are completely at the mercy of our environment. If an email notification chimes, we instantly abandon a complex project to read it. If a colleague mentions a rumor, we drop our train of thought to engage. If our mind feels a slight, almost imperceptible friction when trying to write a difficult report, autopilot immediately steers us towards something easier and more stimulating, like checking a group chat or refreshing a news feed. We spend our days reacting to whatever is loudest, shiniest, or most urgent, completely losing our grip on what is actually important. To break this habit, we must learn to categorize the ways we spend our time. If you step back and look at the landscape of your daily tasks, you will notice that everything you do generally falls into 4 distinct realms, defined by 2 simple questions. Is this task productive, and is this task attractive? The first realm consists of tasks that are both highly attractive and entirely unproductive. These are the distractions that constantly pull at our sleeves. Think of the endless scrolling on social media, the sudden urge to browse an online store for things you do not need, or falling down a rabbit hole of entertaining but useless videos. These activities provide a quick, delicious hit of dopamine to the brain. They are incredibly fun in the moment, but they act as a black hole for your potential, consuming massive amounts of time while yielding absolutely zero meaningful return. The second realm is the most deceptive, tasks that are unproductive and unattractive. This is the realm of unnecessary work. Imagine sitting at your desk, knowing you have a major presentation to design. Instead of opening the software and facing the blank screen, you suddenly decide that your physical desktop needs to be completely reorganized. You spend 45 minutes color-coding old files, rearranging your pens, and clearing out your digital trash bin. You are not having fun, and you are not actually moving your life or career forward, but you feel busy. Unnecessary work is simply an active, cleverly disguised form of laziness. We retreat here when we want to avoid the friction of real effort, hiding behind the illusion of productivity. The third realm involves the necessary work. These are the tasks that are highly productive but fundamentally unattractive. They are the unglamorous chores of professional and personal life. Think of sitting through a mandatory update meeting, painstakingly balancing your monthly budget, or filling out tedious administrative paperwork. You rarely wake up excited to tackle these items, and you usually have to force yourself to push through them. They are essential to keeping your life running smoothly, but they do not ignite your passion or create massive forward momentum. Finally, we reach the fourth realm, purposeful work. This is where the magic happens. These tasks are both highly productive and deeply engaging. This is the work you are meant to do. For a writer, it is the act of crafting the narrative. For a leader, it is mentoring a promising team member. For a parent, it is putting the phone away and being entirely present while playing with their child. Purposeful tasks require intense brain power and unique skills, but they are also the tasks that create the largest possible impact in your life. When you are immersed in purposeful work, time seems to vanish. You are fully alive, fully engaged, and operating at your absolute highest potential. If we lived in a perfect world, we would spend all of our time effortlessly gliding between necessary and purposeful work. But because we are human, and because our brains naturally crave immediate stimulation and avoid discomfort, we constantly drift toward distractions and unnecessary busywork. When we operate on autopilot, our minds will always choose the path of least resistance. We will instinctively choose the quick distraction over the deep, purposeful project. Breaking the autopilot habit requires a radical, deliberate shift in awareness. It means pausing throughout your day, taking a deep breath, and asking yourself what you are actually doing in this exact moment and why you are doing it. Are you reacting to a ping, or are you executing a plan? Are you hiding in unnecessary busywork, or are you bravely facing your purposeful work? By bringing conscious intention to the forefront of your mind, you stop being a passive passenger in your own life. You step into the driver's seat, ready to reclaim your attention and direct it exactly where it matters most. But to do this effectively, we must first understand the fascinating hidden limits of how much our minds can actually hold at any one time. Chapter 3. Understanding your attentional space. Think of a moment when you walked confidently into a room in your house, your mind set on a specific mission. Perhaps you left the living room to grab a pen from the kitchen. But right as you crossed the threshold, your partner called out a question. A catchy song played on the television in the background, and you noticed a pile of mail sitting on the counter. Suddenly, you froze in the middle of the kitchen floor, completely blanking on why you were there in the first place. You stood there, feeling mildly foolish, retracing your mental steps until the thought finally re-emerged. This universal, deeply human experience is not a sign of a failing memory. It is a perfect everyday illustration of the incredibly strict limits of your attention. To truly master your focus, you must first understand the invisible boundaries of your mind. Every single second, your environment is blasting a torrential fire hose of sensory data at you. There are millions of bits of information surrounding you right now. The hum of an appliance, the exact temperature of the air against your skin, the texture of the chair you are sitting on, the shifting shadows on the wall. Yet your conscious mind can only process a microscopic fraction of that data at any given moment, roughly 40 bits. You are essentially sipping from a roaring fire hose through a remarkably tiny straw. Because this capacity is so incredibly small, we have a mental scratch pad where we temporarily store the information we are actively using. Think of this as your attentional space. It is the canvas of your current awareness. When you are having a deep, late-night conversation with a close friend, trying to pass the emotional weight behind their words, that conversation consumes almost all of your attentional space. When you are trying to calculate a tip at a noisy restaurant while the waiter hovers and your friends laugh at a joke, you are forcing multiple demanding inputs into that very same limited space. The volume of this mental scratch pad is astonishingly constrained. On average, we can only hold about 4 distinct pieces of information in our short-term memory at the exact same time. If you are sent to the store to buy eggs, milk, bread, and butter, you will likely remember them easily. But if someone adds 6 more random items to that list as you are walking out the door, those new items will violently push the original items right out of your attentional space. We intuitively try to bypass this limit by clumping information together, a process known as chunking. It is why we memorize long phone numbers not as 10 separate digits, but as smaller, distinct groups. But regardless of how clever we are, the absolute capacity of our mental scratch pad remains fixed. This finite space dictates exactly what we can and cannot do simultaneously. We constantly hear about the myth of multitasking, but the reality is beautifully nuanced. Whether or not you can juggle 2 things at once depends entirely on how much attentional space those specific tasks require. Consider the act of walking through a quiet park while listening to an audiobook. You can do this flawlessly. Why? Because walking is a deeply ingrained habit. Once you initiate the physical motion of putting one foot in front of the other, your brain essentially places that activity on autopilot, requiring almost zero attentional space. This leaves your mental scratchpad wide open to absorb the complex narrative of the book. Habits demand a tiny whisper of attention. Complex tasks demand a megaphone. The disaster occurs when we arrogantly try to cram two complex tasks into a space designed for one. Imagine trying to read a dense financial report while actively participating in a conference call. It feels like your brain is a chaotic ping-pong match. You hear a sentence from the phone and you lose your place on the page. You read a paragraph on the page and you realize you have absolutely no idea what your colleague just said. You are not actually multitasking. You are rapidly, exhaustingly switching your attentional spotlight back and forth between two demanding inputs. This frantic switching comes with a massive hidden tax. We are simply not designed to pivot seamlessly from one complex thought to another. When you abandon a deep task to check a sudden email, your brain does not completely let go of the first task. A sticky residue of that previous thought lingers in your attentional space, clouding your focus. It is like trying to paint a beautiful new picture on a canvas without fully wiping away the wet paint from the last one. This cognitive residue slows you down, increases your chances of making mistakes, and drains your mental stamina. Studies show that when we are interrupted from a complex task, it takes an average of 25 minutes just to return to our original level of focus. Every time you allow a notification to pull you away from your purposeful work, you are actively burning your most precious cognitive fuel. When we allow our attentional space to overflow, we experience a profound sense of overwhelm. Have you ever driven home from a long, stressful day at work, your mind racing with unfinished projects, only to arrive in your driveway and realize you forgot to stop for the groceries you desperately needed? Your mental scratchpad was so overstuffed with the anxiety and residue of the workday that there was simply no room left to hold your intention to stop at the store. An overflowing mind leads to a chaotic, reactive life. To reclaim your brilliance, you must become a fierce, unapologetic protector of your attentional space. You must treat it as the sacred, limited real estate that it is. When you clear out the clutter, the open mental loops, the buzzing devices, the urge to do everything at once, you create a pristine environment for your mind to operate. You prepare the ground for something extraordinary. By understanding and respecting the rigid limits of your attention, you are finally ready to flip the switch and enter the most powerful, productive state of human consciousness. Chapter 4. Entering the Hyperfocus State. Think back, for a moment, to the most productive and fulfilling day you have had in recent memory. Recall a time when you sat down to work on a project and the rest of the world simply melted away. On that day, you were likely focused on just one single meaningful task. The difficulty of the work was perfectly balanced, not so simple that you grew bored, and not so overwhelmingly complex that you felt paralyzed by anxiety. You probably did not feel frantic or exhausted. Instead, you likely felt a deep sense of calm, steady energy. When you finally looked up at the clock, you were shocked to realize that hours had passed in what felt like mere minutes. On that day, you did not just work hard, you activated the most powerful, productive mode your brain possesses. You entered the state of hyperfocus. Hyperfocus occurs when you deliberately choose a single, important object of attention and allow it to expand until it completely fills your limited attentional space. It is the absolute opposite of living on autopilot. But there is a crucial caveat. You must never waste this powerful state on a habit. Imagine you are walking down a busy sidewalk, moving effortlessly. Suddenly, you decide to bring your absolute total concentration to the physical mechanics of your walk. You think about the exact bend of your knees, the striking of your heels, the swinging of your arms. Within seconds, you will feel clumsy, robotic, and uncoordinated. The same phenomenon happens to skilled typists if they suddenly try to focus intensely on the exact location of the keys beneath their fingers. Their speed drops and their errors multiply. Hyperfocus is a precious cognitive resource that must be reserved exclusively for complex, demanding, and highly consequential work. To enter this state reliably, we must guide our minds through 4 distinct stages. The first, and arguably the most important, is setting a powerful intention. Intention must always precede attention. If you sit down at your desk without a clear plan, your environment will immediately hijack your day. To prevent this, try adopting the rule of 3. Before you open a single email or check a single message, fast forward to the end of your day. Ask yourself, what 3 things will I be most proud to have accomplished by the time I go to sleep tonight? By constraining your focus to just 3 significant goals, you filter out the trivial noise and anchor your mind to what truly matters. You can also deepen your intention by weighing the absolute consequences of your tasks. Look at your responsibilities not just for what they demand in the moment, but for the chain reactions they create. What is the one task that acts like the first domino in a long sequence, making everything else easier or irrelevant? Consider the second and third order consequences of your actions. Spending an hour writing a training guide for a new employee might feel like a chore today, but the second order consequence is that they feel welcomed, and the third order consequence is that you save yourself hundreds of hours of answering repetitive questions in the future. Consequential tasks are the bedrock of hyperfocus. However, even a brilliant intention will collapse if it remains vague. Telling yourself that you will simply work on a difficult project today is a weak promise that your brain will easily negotiate its way out of. You must create an implementation intention. You need to visualize the specific details. Tell yourself exactly when you will do it, where you will be sitting, and what specific action you will take first. Research proves that transforming a vague wish into a highly specific plan dramatically multiplies your odds of actually following through. You remove the friction of decision-making from the moment of action, allowing your brain to transition into the work almost automatically. The second stage of entering hyperfocus involves stripping away all the external and internal distractions that threaten to hijack your attentional space. We will explore the deep mechanics of this in the near future, but you must understand that trying to enter a state of deep focus while your environment is buzzing and pinging is an exercise in futility. The third stage is the actual plunge, committing to focus on your chosen task for a predetermined amount of time. This is often where you will feel a massive physical wall of mental resistance. Your brain does not want to do the hard work. It wants the easy dopamine of a quick distraction. To overcome this, you must shrink the duration of your focus until the resistance disappears. If the thought of working for an hour makes you want to flee, ask yourself if you can do 30 minutes. If that still feels too heavy, commit to just 15 minutes or even 5. Once you overcome the initial friction of getting started, the momentum takes over and you will often find yourself effortlessly working far beyond your initial timer. To keep yourself anchored during these periods, it can be incredibly powerful to utilize an hourly awareness chime on a watch or phone. When it sounds, it is not an interruption. It is a gentle tap on the shoulder reminding you to check your mental dashboard. It asks you to observe your mind and question if you are operating on autopilot or if you are still executing your chosen intention. Finally, the fourth stage is the beautiful, inevitable, and deeply human act of returning. No matter how skilled you become, your mind is going to wander. It is wired to drift away from the present moment for nearly half of your waking hours. The true mastery of hyperfocus is not about achieving a flawless, unbroken state of pure concentration. That is impossible. True mastery is simply noticing that your mind has drifted and gently, without a single ounce of guilt or frustration, drawing your attention right back to your original intention. When you align these 4 stages, choosing an intention, eliminating the noise, plunging into the work, and gently returning when you drift, you unlock a profound level of professional output and personal presence. But intention alone cannot survive in a hostile environment. You can map out the perfect plan, but if you are surrounded by brilliant engineers who have designed devices specifically to steal your attention, your focus will inevitably shatter. To truly protect this hyper-focused state, we must learn to ruthlessly conquer the vibrant, noisy world of distractions that surrounds us. Chapter 5. Conquering the Distraction. Economy. Imagine you are an architect preparing to draft the blueprints for a career-defining project. You sit down at a pristine desk, a steaming cup of coffee in hand, fully intending to create something magnificent. But just as you pick up your drafting pencil, you decide to quickly check your inbox just to ensure there are no morning emergencies. That single, seemingly harmless click is the opening of a floodgate. You see a promotional email, which reminds you to check your bank balance, which leads to opening a new tab, and suddenly a notification slides across your screen from a friend sharing a funny video. Before you have drawn a single line of your blueprint, 45 minutes have vanished into the digital ether. This is not a failure of your personal willpower. It is a perfectly predictable reaction in a modern economy designed to actively farm and harvest your attention. Researchers who study human behavior in real office environments have discovered a terrifying metric regarding our ability to sustain concentration. When we sit in front of a computer screen, we typically last a mere 40 seconds before we switch tasks, open a new window, or succumb to some form of interruption. We love to blame our loud colleagues, open-plan offices, or demanding clients for breaking our focus, but the truth is far more uncomfortable. We interrupt ourselves just as frequently as the outside world interrupts us. When the work gets hard, ambiguous, or frustrating, our brains actively hunt for an escape route, seeking out the easy, pleasurable dopamine hit of a new notification or a fresh news feed. This constant switching is not a harmless quirk of modern life. Every time you abandon a complex thought to glance at a seemingly innocent message, you pay a massive cognitive tax. It takes an average of 25 minutes for your brain to fully recover and return to its original depth of focus after an interruption. You are not just losing the 30 seconds it took to read that text message. You are bleeding away half an hour of your highest level creative potential. To truly enter the state of hyperfocus we explored earlier, you cannot simply rely on good intentions. You must actively tame the distractions in your environment before they have the chance to strike. To conquer these constant disruptions, we must recognize that not all distractions are created equal. They generally fall into distinct categories defined by things we can control versus things we cannot, and things we find annoying versus things we find genuinely fun. You cannot control a loud emergency siren outside your window, and you cannot completely control an anxious manager who demands an impromptu, urgent meeting. When faced with unavoidable, annoying interruptions, the best approach is to deal with them gracefully, accept the break, and gently return your mind to your original intention as quickly as possible without harboring frustration. Similarly, if an unavoidable but fun distraction occurs, like an old friend surprisingly walking into your workspace, allow yourself to be present and enjoy the human connection without bitter resentment, knowing you will return to your work soon enough. However, the vast majority of our daily distractions are entirely within our control, even if society tells us otherwise. We have convinced ourselves that we must be reachable every single second of the day, allowing our devices to interrupt our lives at their own convenience. Think about the notifications on your smartphone. Every chime, buzz, and flash is a demand for your immediate attention, pulling you away from the physical reality right in front of you. By taking just 5 minutes to delve into your device settings and mercilessly disable every non-essential alert, you strip the device of its power. You decide when to look at the screen. The screen no longer commands you. When it is time to do your most important, purposeful work, you must build a fortress around your mind by creating a personalized, distraction-free mode. Imagine preparing for a deep, underwater dive. You would not leave the oxygen valve open to leak. In your workspace, you shut the door. You put your phone on airplane mode and physically move it into another room, entirely out of your line of sight. You use software to block access to your most tempting websites and social media feeds. You put on noise-canceling headphones. By eliminating every possible alternative object of attention, you leave your brain with absolutely no choice but to engage with the difficult, meaningful task at hand. The relief you feel when you finally disconnect from the digital noise is palpable. The anxious need to constantly check in simply evaporates, allowing you to conserve your mental energy for the work itself. Of course, you cannot live in a sealed fortress forever. We all have collaborative work to do, which requires shifting into a reduced distraction mode. In this mode, you must fundamentally change your relationship with the ultimate workplace distraction: email. Email is a unique beast that consumes far more of your attention than your actual time. If you keep your inbox open all day, treating it like a chat room, you will never achieve deep focus. Instead, treat your inbox like a physical mailbox at the end of a long driveway. You do not walk down the driveway 80 times a day to check for letters. You check it once or twice, at predetermined times. By batch processing your communications, you protect your prime cognitive hours while still remaining a responsible teammate. Your physical surroundings also play a massive role in shaping your focus. Think of someone trying to eat healthier while keeping a massive jar of their favorite chocolate chip cookies sitting directly in the middle of their kitchen counter. No matter how strong their willpower is in the morning, by late afternoon, when their energy is depleted, they will inevitably eat the cookies. The environmental cue is simply too powerful. Your workspace operates the exact same way. If your desk is cluttered with unread mail, sticky notes from old projects, and a tablet loaded with games, those objects will silently drain your willpower all day long. Modifying your external environment to remove tempting cues is half the battle of focus. Finally, you must confront the distractions that live entirely inside your own head. Even in a silent, perfectly clean room with no technology, your mind will generate its own interruptions. You will suddenly remember a utility bill that needs paying or a birthday present you need to buy. If you try to hold all of these unresolved loops in your active memory, they will continually surface, pulling you out of your deep work. The solution is wonderfully simple. Externalize everything. Keep a dedicated notepad beside you, and the second a stray obligation pops into your mind, write it down. By capturing the thought on paper, you signal to your brain that the task is safe and will be handled later, allowing your mental scratchpad to instantly clear. Taming distractions is not about punishment or extreme isolation. It is about creating a clean, quiet space where your best self can finally show up and do the work it was meant to do. Chapter 6. Building the Hyperfocus Habit. Imagine you have done everything perfectly. You have retreated to a quiet room, left your smartphone powered down in a completely different part of the house, and installed software to block every distracting website on your computer. You have set a powerful intention to finish a critical, deeply meaningful project. You sit down, stare at the screen, and wait for the magic of total concentration to wash over you. But instead of diving into the work, your mind suddenly escapes. You find yourself thinking about a tense conversation you had with a neighbor 3 days ago, or fantasizing about a vacation you want to take next summer, or worrying about a strange noise your car engine is making. Even in a perfectly sterile, distraction-free environment, your attention fractures. This deeply frustrating experience begs a fundamental question. If the physical world around us is quiet, why does the inner world of our minds insist on wandering? Our minds are notorious wanderers, and they tend to drift away from the present moment for a handful of specific, predictable reasons. We naturally lose our grip on the present when we are feeling stressed, when we are weighed down by unresolved personal concerns, or when we are operating in a chaotic, unpredictable environment. But perhaps the most fascinating and common reason our minds escape is simply that we have unused attentional space. Your mental scratchpad demands to be filled. If the task you are currently performing is too simple or too familiar, it only consumes a fraction of your cognitive capacity. Your brain, abhorring a vacuum, automatically fills that leftover space with daydreams, anxieties, and random memories. The counterintuitive solution to a wandering mind is often to make your work significantly harder. We reach our peak levels of engagement when the challenge of a task perfectly matches our current level of skill. Imagine a highly experienced software engineer tasked with manually updating hundreds of basic text files. The work is tedious and requires almost zero technical expertise. Because her skill level vastly exceeds the challenge, she feels intensely bored. Her unused attentional space fills with distractions, and she finds herself constantly opening new browser tabs to read the news. But what if she changes the parameters of the task? What if instead of manually updating the files, she decides to challenge herself to write a complex, elegant script that automates the entire process? Suddenly, the difficulty of the task matches her high level of skill. The work demands her entire attentional space, banishing the boredom and pulling her deeply into a state of total immersion. If you find your mind constantly wandering at work, you must honestly question whether your daily tasks are complex enough to actually capture your full attention. As you become more fiercely protective of your focus and learn to execute your work efficiently, you will inevitably encounter a strange new problem. You will finish your work early. In the realm of productivity, there is a well-known phenomenon stating that work will always expand to fit the time you have allotted for its completion. If you do not actively manage this newfound free time, your brain will unconsciously invent trivial, unimportant tasks to fill the void. Imagine a dedicated manager who masters the art of eliminating distractions and finishes her weekly reports by Wednesday afternoon. Instead of embracing the extra time to engage in deep, strategic planning or simply going home to recharge, she feels a creeping sense of guilt about not looking busy. She spends the next 2 days overanalyzing minor details, scheduling unnecessary check-in meetings, and endlessly reorganizing her digital files. To build a lasting habit of focus, you must become comfortable with the reality that true productivity often results in having less actual work to do. You must deliberately choose to fill that space with highly consequential projects, or simply allow yourself to rest rather than padding your schedule with active laziness. Beyond merely managing the space you currently possess, you actually have the power to physically increase the size of your attentional space. Increasing your working memory capacity allows you to hold more information in your mind simultaneously, process complex problems faster, and bounce back from interruptions with remarkable speed. You might be tempted to seek out digital brain training games that promise to boost your cognitive powers, but rigorous scientific studies have shown that these programs fail to deliver meaningful real-world results. They simply make you better at playing the specific game. However, there is one ancient, profoundly validated practice that reliably and measurably expands your mental capacity: meditation. Meditation is often misunderstood as a mystical, intimidating practice requiring you to sit perfectly still in a silent cave while emptying your mind of all thoughts. In reality, it is a highly practical, mechanical exercise in attention management. It is the literal practice of hyperfocus. When you sit down and simply pay attention to the physical sensation of your breath, you are choosing a very small, simple object of attention. Because observing your breath does not require much cognitive effort, your mind will inevitably wander. That is not a failure. That is the entire point of the exercise. The magic happens in the exact moment you realize your mind has drifted, and you gently, without judgment, pull your focus back to the breath. Every single time you bring your wandering mind back to your chosen intention, you are performing a mental push-up. You are actively strengthening the executive functioning of your brain. Studies have shown that even a brief, daily practice significantly increases working memory capacity, reduces mind wandering, and dramatically boosts performance on complex cognitive tests. You can also build this mental muscle through everyday mindfulness. Consider the incredibly mundane act of taking your morning shower. For most of your life, you have probably never actually experienced your shower. As the warm water hits your back, your mind is already at the office, actively arguing with a difficult colleague or nervously rehearsing a presentation you have to give later that afternoon. Your physical body is in the bathroom, but your attentional space is entirely consumed by the future. Mindfulness is the practice of anchoring your mind completely to the sensory details of the present moment. It is the act of feeling the temperature of the water, smelling the soap, and listening to the sound of the drops hitting the tile. By deliberately focusing on these small physical realities, you train your brain to stay exactly where you command it to stay, expanding your capacity to remain present in every other area of your life. This intense, deliberate presence is arguably more important in our personal lives than it is in our professional ones. When you cross the threshold of your home at the end of the day, hyperfocus transforms from a tool of productivity into an instrument of profound connection. Think of sitting across from your partner at the dinner table as they describe a deeply frustrating situation they are facing at work. Often, we listen with only half of our attention. We nod our heads, but internally we are rapidly formulating a brilliant piece of advice to solve their problem, waiting anxiously for our turn to speak. We miss the subtle emotional weight in their voice because we are not fully present. True connection requires silencing that inner monologue. It requires giving the other person your absolute, undivided attention, waiting to hear the period at the end of their sentence before you even begin to think about your response. When you offer someone the totality of your attentional space, you are offering them the deepest, most authentic form of love and respect imaginable. To cultivate this level of mastery, you must learn to navigate the intense mental friction that occurs right at the starting line of any meaningful task. We experience the absolute highest level of mental resistance at the very beginning of an endeavor, before momentum has a chance to take over. If you look at an overflowing, messy garage, the thought of spending an entire Saturday cleaning it feels completely overwhelming, so you retreat to the couch. But if you conquer that initial hesitation and simply start organizing one single shelf, you often find the energy to clean for hours. To beat this resistance, you must fiercely shrink your commitment. If the idea of focusing deeply on a massive project for an hour makes you want to surrender, give yourself permission to focus for just 5 minutes. you must also become acutely aware of the excuses you tell yourself. Whenever you claim that you simply do not have the time to exercise, to read, or to sit quietly with your thoughts, perform a mental task swap. Ask yourself if you would somehow find the time if your favorite television show aired a surprise episode, or if a friend invited you to a free dinner. You always have the time. You are simply choosing to spend your attention elsewhere. By pushing through that initial discomfort, managing the complexity of your work, and engaging in daily practices that stretch your mental capacity, you construct an impenetrable foundation for your attention. You learn to lock your mind onto a target with the precision of a laser beam. But the human mind is not designed to operate at maximum intensity forever. Just as a muscle requires rest to grow stronger, your brain requires deliberate periods of profound relaxation. We have mastered the art of holding on tightly to our focus. Now, we must explore the radical, deeply creative power of learning how to let it go. Chapter 7. The Power of Scatterfocus. Think back to the last time you experienced a sudden, brilliant flash of insight. Perhaps you were trying to solve a complex logistical problem at work, or maybe you were struggling to find the right words for a difficult conversation. You likely sat at your desk for hours, staring at a blinking cursor, trying to force the answer into existence using sheer willpower and hyperfocus. But the answer refused to come. Defeated, you finally walked away. You went for a long, meandering walk through your neighborhood, or you stepped into a hot shower, or you started mindlessly scrubbing a stubborn pan in the kitchen sink. And then, completely out of nowhere, the exact solution you had been agonizing over simply materialized in your mind. The tangled knots untied themselves. This phenomenon is not an accident, and it is not magic. Your brain deliberately chose that exact moment of rest to connect the scattered dots of your problem. You had inadvertently activated the most profoundly creative mode your mind possesses, scatterfocus. For the entire first half of our journey, we have treated a wandering mind as an enemy to be vanquished. We have built fortresses to keep our attention locked firmly onto a single target. And while that intense outward focus is the absolute pinnacle of human productivity, it represents only half of your cognitive potential. If hyperfocus is about directing your attention outward into the world, scatterfocus is the deliberate act of turning your attention entirely inward into the vast, uncharted wilderness of your own mind. It is the practice of intentionally letting your mind wander. When you step back from demanding complex tasks and allow your attentional space to empty out, you unlock 3 distinct, deeply powerful mental abilities. First, your brain begins to automatically plan for the future. It is impossible to chart a long-term course for your life when your mental scratchpad is overflowing with the immediate burning demands of the present moment. Second, you give your cognitive batteries a chance to genuinely recharge. And third, you supercharge your creativity. When you stop forcing your brain to process new external information, it immediately begins sifting through the massive archives of everything you already know, forging unseen connections and assembling brilliant new ideas. If this state of mind is so incredibly beneficial, you might wonder why we actively avoid it. Why do we instinctively reach for our phones the absolute second we are forced to stand in a line at the grocery store or sit in a silent waiting room? We live in an era where we are terrified of being left alone with our own thoughts. Psychological research has revealed a startling, almost tragic truth about human nature. When placed in a completely empty room and given the choice between sitting quietly with their own thoughts or voluntarily administering a mild, uncomfortable electric shock to themselves, a staggering number of people will actively choose to experience physical pain. We would rather physically hurt ourselves than endure the discomfort of an unstimulated, wandering mind. This intense aversion is not a personal failing. It is deeply embedded in our evolutionary hardware. The human brain was not designed to sit at a desk and execute knowledge work. It was meticulously wired over millions of years to ensure our physical survival and reproduction. To keep us alive in a brutal, unforgiving wilderness, our brains evolved to intensely crave 3 specific types of stimuli: the novel, the pleasurable, and the threatening. Paying attention to the rustle of a novel predator or the pleasurable discovery of a high-calorie fruit kept our ancestors alive. Today we no longer forage for berries or hide from predators, but our evolutionary wiring remains exactly the same. We have simply replaced the physical wilderness with a digital one. We relentlessly seek the novelty of a constantly refreshing social media feed, the quick pleasure of a digital like, and the perceived threat of a stressful, alarming news headline. When we strip away our devices and force ourselves to sit in silence, our brains do not simply turn off. Because the external world is no longer providing those survival cues, our minds turn inward to hunt for them. When your mind wanders, it naturally gravitates toward internal threats and pleasures. This is why, when you are trying to relax, you suddenly find yourself agonizing over a minor, awkward comment you made at a dinner party 5 years ago, or engaging in a vivid, imaginary argument with a coworker. Your brain is constantly scanning your memory archives for potential social or physical threats, trying to learn from the past to protect you in the future. It also conjures up highly pleasurable fantasies and daydreams to provide a quick hit of internal dopamine. This internal noise can feel deeply uncomfortable, which is precisely why we desperately seek out external distractions to drown it out. But if you can push through that initial, highly uncomfortable friction of silence, the places your mind travels are extraordinary. When researchers map the destinations of a wandering mind, they find that we are essentially mental time travelers. We spend a small fraction of our wandering time, roughly 12%, traveling backward into the past. We ruminate on our mistakes, process difficult emotions, and try to extract valuable lessons from our history. We spend a larger portion of our time, around 28%, anchored in the abstract present, subconsciously untangling the immediate problems and complexities of our current lives. But the vast majority of our mental wandering is spent traveling directly into the future. This is the true magic of scatterfocus. As human beings, we possess the incredibly rare, almost miraculous biological ability to vividly imagine a reality that does not yet exist. When you let your mind wander, it instinctively begins building roadmaps. It considers your long-term ambitions, simulates different potential outcomes, and aligns your daily actions with your ultimate goals. It is the ultimate strategic planning session, and it happens completely automatically, provided you give it the silent space to operate. By reframing mind-wandering from a guilty, lazy habit into a deliberate, highly strategic tool, you gain access to a wellspring of creativity and foresight. You stop viewing a quiet walk without a podcast as a waste of time and start treating it as a vital incubation period for your best ideas. You begin to realize that the moments when you are seemingly doing nothing at all are often the moments when you are accomplishing the most. But to fully harness this creative mode, we must dive deeper into the restorative side of scatterfocus, exploring how to genuinely rest our minds in a world that never stops moving. Chapter 8. The Art of Mental Recharging. There is a kind of tiredness that sleep cannot fix. Think about someone you probably know. Maybe it is you, who comes home after a long, grueling day at the office. You successfully navigated back-to-back meetings, suppressed your frustration when dealing with a difficult client, and managed to push through a complex report just before the deadline. You walk through your front door, drop your bag, and collapse onto the couch. You are physically perfectly fine. You have been sitting in a comfortable chair all day. Yet, you feel hollowed out, as if a vital inner battery has been completely drained. You tell yourself you are going to rest. So you pull out your smartphone and begin to scroll through a colorful, endless feed of videos and updates. 2 hours pass. You finally put the device down and head to bed, but you do not feel rejuvenated. In fact, you feel slightly more agitated, foggy, and depleted than when you first sat down. You dedicated a massive chunk of your evening to what you thought was recovery, but you completely failed to recharge your mind. To understand why this happens, we have to look closely at what actually consumes our mental energy. Throughout the day, you are constantly making choices that require immense cognitive effort. Every time you force yourself to focus on an unattractive but necessary task, you are spending energy. Every time you suppress the urge to check a buzzing notification while trying to have a meaningful conversation, you are burning fuel. This constant, invisible effort to direct your attention and resist temptation is incredibly taxing. By actively taming distractions in advance and removing tempting cues from your environment, you actually expend significantly less mental energy because you no longer have to constantly regulate your behavior. You remove the friction of having to constantly say no to your impulses. This is why, curiously, after a day spent deeply immersed in a single, hyper-focused task, you often feel less tired than you do after a chaotic, fragmented day of doing seemingly easier, slower work. When you are not violently tearing your attention back and forth between a dozen different inputs, your cognitive stamina lasts much longer. But even with the most immaculate environmental controls, your focus is not infinite. There will always come a moment when your concentration wavers and your attentional space feels heavy and saturated. When this inevitable fatigue sets in, the absolute worst thing you can do is turn to a highly stimulating distraction. When you scroll through a social media feed, read rapid-fire news articles, or play a mobile game, you are still forcing your brain to rapidly decode visual information, interpret social cues, and process shifting emotions. You are still demanding that your mind perform complex work, just in a different, more entertaining flavor. You are not resting, you're simply switching the channel on your exhaustion. True, restorative rest requires a fundamental shift in how you use your attentional space. It requires stepping away from high-stimulation environments and allowing your mind to exist without demanding anything of it. A genuine break is energizing specifically because it provides a pocket of time where you can completely press pause on the exhausting act of regulating your behavior. You must permit your mind to drop its heavy load and wander freely. Imagine a software developer working frantically against a brutal end-of-week launch deadline. By Thursday afternoon, he hits a massive, seemingly impenetrable wall of code. His vision blurs, his frustration spikes, and his focus entirely collapses. The immediate modern temptation is to open a new browser tab and watch internet videos under the guise of taking a break. Instead, he physically stands up, leaves his phone on his desk, and walks out of the building. He finds a bench near a busy sidewalk and simply sits there, people-watching. He watches the rhythm of the foot traffic, the way the wind moves the branches of a nearby tree, and the shifting patterns of the clouds. He is engaging in a relatively mindless activity that demands almost zero attentional space. Because he is no longer forcing his brain to solve logic puzzles or suppress the urge to check emails, the immense pressure inside his mind finally releases. This intentional act of scattering his focus effectively and genuinely replenishes his mental energy supply. When he returns to his keyboard 30 minutes later, the exhaustion has lifted, and he can immediately see the flaw in the code that was completely invisible to his stressed, depleted mind. This principle applies just as powerfully to your life outside of the workplace. When you are at home, participating in activities that are relatively mindless, like washing the dishes, sweeping the floor, or methodically folding warm laundry, you create the perfect conditions for cognitive recovery. These physical habits require just enough manual engagement to keep you occupied, but they leave your mental scratchpad beautifully clear. By intentionally disabling pointless, novel distractions during these moments, you are purposefully disengaging from the demands of your work and life. You are granting yourself permission to simply exist. Learning to step back and deliberately embrace these low-stimulation, wandering states is a profound act of self-preservation. It is the only way to heal the deep cognitive fatigue that accumulates in a modern, hyper-connected world. When you stop treating rest as an afterthought or a moment to passively consume more digital noise, you reclaim your vitality. You build a resilient, enduring stamina, and beautifully, as your mind genuinely rests and wanders through these quiet moments, it quietly begins to organize the chaotic fragments of your life, preparing to weave them into something new and extraordinary. Chapter 9. Connecting and Collecting Ideas. Imagine an ambitious entrepreneur standing in an empty room staring at a blank whiteboard, desperately trying to innovate a new product. They grip the marker, their heart rate elevated, trying to force a brilliant, world-changing idea into existence through sheer willpower and intense concentration. But the board remains empty, and the mind remains blank. We often romanticize creativity as a mystical lightning bolt that strikes the chosen few from the heavens, completely unprompted. But the reality of how human beings generate insights is far more grounded and mechanical. Creativity is not magic. It is simply the act of connecting dots. Think of a dot as any individual idea, any specific memory, or any random piece of information that you have ever absorbed and remembered. When you experience a sudden, brilliant eureka moment, your brain has mysteriously chosen that exact moment of rest to connect a few of the constellations of dots swirling in your head. But here is the fundamental, inescapable truth about this process. You cannot connect dots that you have not first taken the time to collect. The creative output of your mind is entirely dependent on the quality of your inputs. Think about your attentional space, that vital, strictly limited mental scratchpad we explored earlier. Every single day, from the moment you wake up, you are making choices about what to load into that space. If you spend your hours passively consuming highly stimulating, instantly gratifying distractions, if you gorge on stressful news headlines, endless streams of trivial social media updates, and mindless entertainment, you are absolutely collecting dots. But you must ask yourself what kind of picture your brain can possibly paint with those specific dots. When your mind eventually wanders and attempts to piece things together, it only has access to the shallow, fragmented information you have fed it. You end up with a mind that feels constantly buzzing with anxiety and triviality, fundamentally unable to produce anything of deep, lasting value. To cultivate a genuinely creative, innovative mind, you must become a fierce, uncompromising curator of what you consume. You must deliberately choose to collect high-quality dots. This means intentionally directing your hyperfocus toward complex, rich, and challenging material. It means immersing yourself deeply in a difficult book that stretches your worldview, engaging in a nuanced, distraction-free conversation with someone who challenges your assumptions, or dedicating your full attention to studying a completely new skill. When you engage with the world in this deliberate way, you are stockpiling your mental archives with diverse, robust dots. You are giving your brain high-grade intellectual fuel. But gathering the absolute best raw materials is only the first half of the equation. If you only ever consume information, your mind becomes a bloated, disorganized warehouse of unlinked facts. This is exactly where the profound power of scatterfocus re-enters the picture. When you intentionally step back from intense concentration and let your mind wander, you are not just resting, you are activating your brain's hidden creative mode. Scattering your attention and focusing on nothing in particular literally supercharges the dot-connecting powers of your brain. When you stop forcing your mind to process a constant stream of new external demands, it immediately goes to work on the raw materials already stored inside. It begins sifting through your memories. It floats incubating thoughts to the surface of your attentional space, and it lets you piece together unseen solutions to complex problems. It takes the deep conversation you had on Tuesday and links it to a challenging article you read a year ago, creating an entirely new, brilliant perspective that you never could have forced through sheer effort. Think of a master chef preparing a legendary meal. The chef does not just throw random ingredients into a pot and hope for the best. First, they go to the market and meticulously select the absolute highest quality ingredients, the freshest vegetables, the most robust spices, the finest cuts. That is the critical collection phase, but the masterpiece is not created while they are frantically gathering. The masterpiece happens when they step back, let the ingredients simmer, and allow the complex flavors to meld and connect in unseen ways over time. You are the chef of your own mind. You must be ruthless about the quality of the information you allow into your brain. And then, just as importantly, you must have the courage to step away from the relentless consumption of the modern world. You must go for a quiet walk, sit in a peaceful room, or simply stare out a window, trusting completely that your mind is doing the silent, profound work of weaving those carefully collected dots into a beautiful, meaningful tapestry. Chapter 10. Fostering Collaborative Focus. Picture a modern office space, an open-plan sea of desks humming with a chaotic, nervous energy. Everyone is typing frantically, phones are buzzing, and instant messages are popping up on screens like a never-ending game of digital whack-a-mole. It looks like the absolute pinnacle of productivity, yet, if you look closer, you realize that people are merely passing tasks back and forth, treading water in a sea of busy work. They are highly collaborative, but utterly unfocused. As we reach the culmination of our journey into the depths of human attention, we must confront a vital reality. Mastering your own mind is only the first step. We do not work or live in total isolation. To truly transform our lives, we must learn to scale these principles of deep concentration and intentional rest to the people around us, creating environments that foster collaborative focus. In any professional environment, our daily responsibilities generally fall into two distinct categories: focus work and collaborative work. Focus work is the solitary, deep, purposeful effort that demands our complete attentional space. Collaborative work, on the other hand, involves interacting with other people, attending meetings, answering questions, and remaining available to keep the team moving forward. The fundamental breakdown of the modern workplace occurs because we treat these two entirely different modes as if they are the exact same thing. We try to execute deep focus work while keeping ourselves entirely available to the chaotic demands of collaboration. We leave our email clients open in the background, allowing anyone to interrupt our concentration on a whim. This constant tension destroys our ability to enter a state of flow and leaves us feeling perpetually exhausted. To foster true collaboration, we must establish clear boundaries that protect the attention of the group. Imagine a visionary leader managing a team of creative designers. Instead of demanding that her team respond to messages within 5 minutes, she implements a radical new policy. She provides every desk with a small, warmly lit lamp. When the lamp is turned on, it acts as a sacred, unbreakable visual cue that the designer is currently in a state of deep hyperfocus. During this time, they are completely exempt from answering emails, attending impromptu meetings, or engaging in casual chatter. By formalizing and protecting this distraction-free mode for the entire team, the leader does not isolate her workers. She actually empowers them to produce their absolute best work. When the lamps turn off, the team shifts back into a highly responsive, collaborative mode, but they do so with a sense of calm accomplishment rather than frantic anxiety. We must also mercilessly evaluate the ways we forcefully gather people together. Consider the traditional office meeting. Gathering a group of people in a conference room for an hour can easily consume an entire week's worth of collective working hours. Yet, how often do we sit in meetings that lack a clear objective? A meeting without a defined agenda is a meeting without a purpose. It is a massive, collective drain on the team's limited attentional space. We must develop the courage to question routine gatherings, challenge attendance lists to ensure only essential people are present, and decline invitations that lack a clear, actionable goal. If you must attend, choose to hyperfocus entirely on the conversation, leaving your devices behind and contributing actively so everyone can return to their purposeful work as quickly as possible. This philosophy of collective attention extends far beyond the walls of the workplace. It is arguably even more vital in the sanctuary of your home. We spend our days donating our best, most vibrant cognitive energy to our employers and our screens, often bringing only the exhausted, fragmented remnants of our attention home to the people we love the most. Think about the simple act of eating dinner with your family. If the television is blaring in the background and smartphones are resting face up next to the dinner plates, the environment is inherently fractured. You are communicating to your loved ones that they are merely one of several competing inputs in your attentional space. But if you collectively agree to disconnect, if you leave the devices in another room and turn toward one another, you create a shared environment of deep presence. Ultimately, managing your attention is not just a clever productivity hack. It is a profound philosophy for living a meaningful life. The quality of your attention dictates the quality of your reality. By understanding the rigid limits of your mind, you learn to treat your focus as a sacred resource. By taming the relentless distractions of the modern world, you reclaim your autonomy. By bravely embracing the silence of a wandering mind, you unlock your deepest creative potential. And by fiercely protecting the attention of your colleagues, friends, and family, you elevate the lives of everyone around you. You stop existing on a mindless, reactive autopilot, and you step boldly into a life of purpose, clarity, and extraordinary connection.